Mind you that in this sequence of archived news reports with those arrested at the warehouse in Jamaica, Queens, and associates elsewhere still sought for, the blind Sheikh Omar Abdel Rahman roams freely, staying in New York and New Jersey.
In addition, tonight, there are new questions about the possible involvement of the Sheikh linked to the World Trade Center bombing. Our team coverage begins with Channel 2's Mary Murphy.
When the FBI drove out this car from the alleged bomb factory in Queens last night, it was unclear whether this vehicle could have been converted into a bomb at some point. What is clear, though, is that the FBI had sophisticated audio surveillance equipment inside and listened in on the entire alleged plot thanks to a confidential informant. Well, Channel 2 News learned tonight that the informant has been working with police and the FBI for 3 years, ever since the murder of Rabbi Meir Kahane of the Jewish Defense League. The informant was able to give up information on Muslims connected to El Sayed Nosair, who was acquitted in the murder. But Nosair emerged again as a central figure in the World Trade Center bombing on February 26, which unfortunately the informant didn't know much about. Also today, the New York Daily News made a further connection between 5 Sudanese nationals who were arrested in the plot and 1 African-American Muslim from Brooklyn. This At-Taqwa Mosque was mentioned as a possible meeting ground for fundamentalists who were interested in a holy war.
There is no such a thing called Muslim fundamentalists, okay?
As this man makes clear, the bitterness over this new focus on Muslim believers and their followers will not go away easily. In Brooklyn, I'm Mary Murphy, Channel 2 News.
I'm John Slattery in Jersey City. Sheikh Omar Abdul Rahman, suspected by the FBI to be connected with those arrested in the bombing plot, arrived at his Jersey City storefront mosque for prayer. Some of his followers are angered by the implication of involvement.
Because there's no evidence or proof that any one of them have been convicted of those people. And just don't attack Islam. You guys are attacking Islam and Muslims for no apparent reason whatsoever.
Immigration officials say for 3 years now, Sheikh Omar has been in the U.S. illegally and got in by mistake. Senator Al D'Amato has complained to President Clinton, asking that the Attorney General investigate why the cleric is still here. Sheikh Omar entered the U.S. in May of 1990 on a tourist visa from the Sudan. The State Department apparently unaware that he was on a list of suspected terrorists banned from the U.S. In April of 91, he was granted a green card. In July of 91, his residency was challenged by the INS for allegedly failing to disclose on entry forms that he was a polygamist and had falsified a check in Egypt in 1987, both grounds for exclusion from the U.S. In January, the INS conducted an exclusionary hearing. In March, immigration ordered him out, which the cleric is now appealing. Authorities suspect the Sheikh's third-story mosque is really more of a headquarters for a political cell preaching opposition to Egyptian President Mubarak. The Sheikh denies connection to any bombing plot, saying he doesn't even know those arrested, except for one, Siddiq Ali.
Authorities say Siddiq Ali was the translator wearing a veil over his head at this June 16th press conference by the man who seems to be at the spiritual and perhaps political center of the plots, Sheikh Omar Abdel Rahman. But one man who evidently had gained the confidence of both is a former Egyptian army officer, Ahmad Ali Salem, who has now widely been identified as the informer that enabled investigators to crack the latest alleged conspiracy. In its complaint against the 8 suspects arrested last week, the government cites the informer as hearing Siddiq Ali boast that he had participated in testing the explosive mixture used in the Trade Center blast. Meanwhile, the attention of investigators has been drawn to a farm near Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, where some of the suspects may have trained in the use of weapons and paramilitary tactics. Navy divers searched a pond there over the weekend, but evidently turned up nothing. The owner of the farm is a Muslim who allegedly owns a gun shop. He denies any involvement with terrorists. And investigators are reportedly looking into links between the foreign-born Muslim extremists and African-American Muslims. In particular, they are reportedly interested in Rodney Hampton L., the only one among the suspects born here, and an organization known as Fukra. That is the Arabic word for the poor. The organization that bears that name is reportedly composed of American black Muslims and is being investigated in connection with a series of murders.
Rodney Hampton L. is a former Black Panther and one of the few suspects in the 1993 cells who had actually fought in Afghanistan with the Taliban and Mujahideen against the Russians and was wounded in battle, becoming paraplegic. Hampton L. was also an associate of Jamaat al-Fukra, or Al-Fuqra, a Pakistani-based organization that also had training camps in upstate New York, which recruited a lot of African-American Muslims, which, as WCBS2 also indicated, that investigators were also looking in that angle for links to the plots. Al-Fuqra is headed by a radical Sheikh, Mubarak al-Galini, who also was a periodic guest and speaker at the Al-Faruq Mosque and also founded the Muslims of America. Galani will later be linked months after 9/11 to the kidnapping of Wall Street journalist Daniel Pearl in Pakistan. Al-Fuqra, who was already engaged in turf war carrying out terrorist attacks against Sikhs in the US and Canada, had members who were suspected and convicted of carrying out the murder of Dr. Rashid Khalifa from the Masjid in Tucson with Wadi al-Hajj. But 2 days after the initial bust in Queens, while the blind sheikh was roaming freely and other suspects were being sought for, President Bill Clinton ordered a missile strike on Iraq on an intelligence site in Baghdad on the eve of a scheduled visit to Kuwait by the former President George H.W. Bush, where authorities arrested 17 people planning to kill the ex-president with explosives hidden in a Toyota Land Cruiser. The plot was discovered in April and alleged to have been organized by Iraqi President Saddam Hussein and his regime.
The Iraqi attack against President Bush was an attack against our country and against all Americans. We could not and have not let such action against our nation go unanswered. From the first days of our revolution, America's security has depended on the clarity of this message: don't tread on us.
The White House forewarned of the possibility of an attack last month when then Communications Director George Stephanopoulos issued a statement on reports that Iraq had tried to assassinate Mr. Bush. Quote, "If we determine Iraq was involved in state-sponsored terrorism, the U.S. will take appropriate action against Iraq."
Clinton's missile strike was in retaliation to the assassination plot, for which Senator Alphonse D'Amato also took the opportunity to associate the attempt in Kuwait from Iraq as terrorism both related to the Trade Center and New York landmarks bombing plots.
What is your initial reaction to the president's decision?
I support it entirely. I think most Americans, all Americans, will join in supporting him. He's done the right thing. He took the time out to verify the facts that Saddam Hussein was behind this, that the Iraqis at the highest level attempted to bring about this assassination of a former president. You just cannot permit this to happen. This was a new kind of warfare. And so this was very appropriate, very measured, and I think all Americans should support him. He's the commander-in-chief. Put aside any other differences because terrorism is going to continue to rear its ugly head in this country. World Trade Center, the attempted bombing of the tunnels, these are the kinds of things that some of these third world nations and others like the Iranians and the Iraqis will attempt to foster. So I think this is a very important blow for freedom and against terrorism.
But the Sheikh remains free, apparently on orders from Washington. News Force Ben Farnsworth is live in Jersey City to explain what some are calling a hands-off policy. Ben?
Well, Matt, the Sheikh Omar Abdel Rahman is not in his apartment now, and in fact hasn't been here for the last couple of days. The last time he was seen was Saturday afternoon. Some reporters followed him as far as they could, and he was heading down the New Jersey Turnpike. One of the people who was with him quipped that they were going to Atlantic City. But his whereabouts at this point are still unknown. And of course, although he is not to be found, there is still an awful lot of talk about him because, as we know, the investigation has centered on the Sheikh and the question why he has not been arrested. And there are a number of theories being put forth. Of course, the obvious one that we have read about so much in the press the last few days has been presented by the government, that the information they have on him is fuzzy, that they don't have enough evidence to pursue him in the case, even though, of course, his voice has shown up on some of the tapes, according to reports, and that he had prior knowledge to the plot. Another theory is that he is a magnet who is drawing these terrorist-prone individuals around him, and that the government would like to keep him in place right where he is so that he can, so that the government can keep an eye on these people. And of course, the third is that he may be more helpful than we think. There are some people who think that the Sheikh himself may be helping the U.S. government in this regard. So at this point, the Sheikh is nowhere to be found. The question is, why hasn't he been arrested? And the inside information from some Middle Eastern experts is that the government may not want him arrested at this point.
In other news, a ninth suspect has been arrested and charged in the alleged terrorist plot to bomb New York City. 27-year-old Earl Gant of Philadelphia was captured today. He's been charged with conspiracy to transport explosives with the intent to injure and kill. Gant allegedly met with the ringleader of the plot, discussing how to procure the raw materials used to make those powerful bombs. Gant faces 5 years in prison and a $250,000 fine if he's convicted.
One of the men suspected in the terrorist plot to bomb targets in New York, 27-year-old Victor Alvarez, was denied bail today. The government portrayed Alvarez as the procurer, the man who could get guns and stolen cars. And authorities claim they have proof, a videotape secretly made at a Queens safe house. On it, they say Alvarez provides the group with an assault weapon and watches as his alleged co-conspirators mix up a fatal concoction.
The government, unfortunately, is opposed to any bail being set for any of the clients in this case, and clearly, despite what they say in court, wants them all to be treated as equals and does not want to distinguish from any of these 8 or more people.
Another defendant, also captured on tape, Mohammed Saleh, is still in custody. Authorities say instead of cash, the Yonkers gas station owner offered to kick in diesel fuel, an ingredient necessary to make this bomb. His attorney says Saleh is a family man who works 12 hours a day, and when the so-called conspiracy was going on, he was home asleep. Before deciding Saleh's fate, the judge asked for a transcript from the incriminating tape. Ironically, the LA Times reports today that these extremists could have been stopped a long time ago. It claims that the FBI had documents seized after the murder of Rabbi Meir Kahane outlining the plot. Only after the bombing of the World Trade Center, which killed 6 people, did the agency translate the papers, which were written in Arabic.
Another surprising turn today in the alleged terrorist plot to bomb New York City. Authorities now say the George Washington Bridge was also a target for attack. The plan was revealed today at a bail hearing for one of 9 suspects, Mohammed Saleh. Prosecutors also say that Saleh has links to the Palestinian terrorist organization Hamas. A judge today denied bail for Saleh and 2 other suspects. A 9th suspect, Earl Gant, was arrested in Philadelphia yesterday. He's fighting extradition to New York.
There was Sheikh rattle and roll tonight. The Sheikh was arrested on immigration charges, but before that happened, federal agents rattled. They thought they lost him, but he's in custody and rolling to a lockup north of the city.
Flanked by attorney Michael Warren and Muslim followers, Sheikh Omar Abdel Rahman surrendered to federal authorities, ending a 2-day game of cat and mouse. Loyal supporters chanted in unison as the blind Muslim cleric emerged from a Brooklyn mosque. Just after 6 tonight, the Sheikh walked from the mosque to a local fire station where INS agents took him into custody.
Do you expect to see him again?
Sure, I expect to see him again. The man is not guilty of anything. All he's doing is just traveling through the land, enjoying the right and forbidding the wrong.
For 2 days, federal agents staked out this neighborhood waiting for the Sheikh to surrender. At one point Thursday night, a man disguised as the Sheikh with his trademark red and white hat jumped in a van and tried to drive away. Federal agents rushed to a car with their guns drawn, only to find out the man was an imposter. Finally, after a midday prayer and several hours of negotiation, the Sheikh turned himself in. INS refused to discuss the Sheikh's future, but police officials say the Sheikh is being taken to a federal facility upstate in Otisville, New York. The Sheikh's legal advisor said his client is not a criminal, and he attacked Assemblyman Dov Hikind and U.S. Senator Alphonse D'Amato, both outspoken critics of the Sheikh.
What could have occurred here today is a tragedy, because we have seen too many tragedies occur, most recently in Texas.
But there was no fire here as in Waco, and Senator Alphonse D'Amato had these words for the Sheikh's followers.
I think we need the death penalty for terrorists who blow up buildings and cause the death of other people. This is a new kind of warfare, and we have to be committed to fighting it.
And there are indications the warfare may have just begun. Amid all this chaos, there's a report out of Egypt that the Sheikh's followers are threatening a worldwide bombing campaign now that their spiritual leader has been taken into custody.
During a 2-month undercover probe, the FBI learned that Sheikh Rahman allegedly had advanced knowledge of a plot by his followers to blow up the United Nations, the federal building, and bridges and tunnels in New York, along with the assassinations of pro-Israel politicians.
The American people absolutely find it morally repugnant that the Sheikh be allowed to bounce around.
The alleged ringleader in that plot was the Sheikh's interpreter, The informant who revealed the plot to the FBI was a former Egyptian colonel who had infiltrated the Sheikh's inner circle and become one of his bodyguards.